All right, everybody, welcome to the next Usui Reiki Ryoho support and community group Facebook Live, where we dive into your questions on the practice of Usui Reiki Ryoho, how I can support, how the group can support, and how we can all better our practice. These are live Q&As, so there's nothing planned. I don't have any script or anything like that. It's just the questions that have been posted already onto the Facebook group. But first and foremost, all the questions live from people who are here in the conversation live. So I turn the floor over to all of you. Ask away anything Usui Reiki Ryoho support. Usui Reiki Ryoho based questions or anything that we can support you on with your practice of Reiki in general. I have a lot of talking points to get to as well if you don't have any questions, but of course, it's better if we focus on your questions. So please feel free to ask away. Anybody? All right. So if there's no questions, then I'll jump into the questions that we have from the Facebook page. I will just start sharing my thoughts on these, and please, feel free to jump in at any time if you have your own opinions or if you'd like to share, you'd like to add. Don't worry about interrupting me or waiting or anything. I've been a teacher my whole life, so I'm very much used to this. Don't worry about it. Don't You can raise your hand if you want, or you can just say, hold on, I don't understand that bit. Can you clarify? I think it's a much more productive conversation this way. So Brian McCarthy on the Facebook group asks, case study examples of distant healing results within Reiki. This is a great question, and it's one that I have a scientific background. So I used to teach astronomy, used to teach economics, philosophy. I've got degrees in both astronomy and economics. And I'm saying all of that because I have, in many ways, a very linear mindset. And so, this idea of Reiki case studies, if we could get something where we could tangibly support the practice with facts, something that was done with scientific rigor and something that was statistically significant and well, like the population was well sorted out, all the biases were removed, and so on, that would be great. Unfortunately, Reiki is far too subjective, right? It's far too like there's no way that we can rule out any of the variables. And let me explain how this could be. If I was to pose a session to all of you, and if I was saying that, I'm from, this happens all the time, by the way, it happens in the Usui group on Facebook. I'm sure many of you have probably been a part of these types of Q&As and things like that in the past. If I was to ask this group, if I was to say we're going to spend the next 45 minutes doing a distance Reiki session for the purpose of setting up a tangible research-based, maybe double-blind, placebo-controlled experiment to see the efficacy of Reiki, okay? We would have to put in so many different parameters to make that double blind and to knock out any type of biases that would be involved. Like, for instance, you couldn't even know that you're sitting into a Reiki research paper because you would already be subject to your own bias. So I don't even know how something like that would be phrased. If we were to say from the very onset, like, well, we're going to do a practice where we just sit together and then you tell me the results or whatever, like we would have to make it so vague to work out any bias that it would be very difficult. I've seen people say things, and some quite prominent Reiki people say things like that they can, they've done experiments on giving Reiki to food or to water or whatever, and then the people in their group will say that the food that they gave Reiki to tastes better and all that stuff. That's just all subjective. If I was sitting there, if we were all together in public and I said that I gave Reiki to, this food, how does it taste? And if all of you viewed me as somebody that you wanted to appease or whatever, then of course you'd be like, oh, it's amazing. I could totally taste it. That's bias. That's confirmation bias. And that's going against all the rigor that we would need. So because Reiki is so personally subjective, because it is such a personal experience, and we can't control the personal bias of the practitioner or the recipient, then I think that any type of rigor from a statistical perspective, a scientific perspective, is going to be pretty much impossible to ever carry out something that is meaningful. There have been some studies that I've seen that are well enough powered statistically, meaning like the population size was good enough and it looked like they were trying to work out a lot of variables, but still, and a lot of biases, but still, we can't, it's like putting a square peg into a round hole. We're trying to use scientific language, which demands form, it demands repetition, it demands the absence of interpretation and subjectivity and personal bias. And we're trying to use that language to explain something that is in many ways the opposite, if that makes sense. You know, I'm sure all of you can, you know, when we sit down for our practice, no practice is the same. So for sure, when I sit down for a practice, there's plenty of times where I'll sit and I don't feel anything. Or there's some times where I'll have mystical experiences. Which one would be more significant? I would argue the one where I feel nothing is the most significant. That would be the penultimate Reiki experience, would be where I don't have any concept of me practicing Reiki. But from a statistical perspective or a research paper perspective, that would be a big flop. The one that everybody would want to read is, oh, yes, Reiki from this teacher produced this result. We can't talk about that, you know. So what I hope to answer this, you know, when I pause, I'm trying to I'm thinking of examples to use here, but what I hope we can do in the Reiki world is I hope that we can move away from a lot of the real out there discussions on the practice of Reiki. I hope that we can drop really grandiose verbiage around the practice. You know, maybe people have heard this. This is why I think Reiki in many ways has a skeptical approach by a lot of people who are on the fence, you know, because they hear people saying things like Reiki, I can use Reiki to charge my cell phone. I'll just say a number of things that maybe you've heard. And I'll, for people who have their camera on, I'll see when it strikes the nerve because you've heard it, because you'll probably start smiling. These are the things that I've heard about Reiki, that somebody saw like their car didn't start, so they just used chokure to start their car and charge their battery. Their food, they give Reikiing their food, so it makes their food healthier. Reikiing water, and then that makes the ice form different crystals. All of these types of this type of language is very problematic because it puts people who are naturally skeptical completely on the other side of that fence, if that makes sense. If we were talking about Reiki just from more based, more neutral perspectives, like Reiki is a method of it's a practice or a method to cultivate internal peace, internal stillness in yourself. And whatever happens in that experience is for you and you alone. That's it. Just like when I say this all the time, and I know many of you have heard me say this many times, we heal when we sleep because we let go of this story of our suffering. So our body's like, finally, Jesus, Bruce got out of the way. Now we can clean up the shop a little bit. Like, thank God that guy's not around for a moment. Now we can finally tidy up and we heal. Our body heals naturally. We just need to get out of the way. So, you know, these types of really grandiose languages are damaging to the practice. And I think, going back to the initial question about the research papers, in some ways, my kitten is, it's the time of night for him to want to play, so I might get interrupted by his insanity. So just bear with me. But the research papers that we have, I think in some ways that if we keep furthering these and we keep demanding that these things can exist, then we will keep producing subpar research documents, if that makes sense. Because we can't talk about things with statistical language that are just not statistically quantifiable. So they will always fail in that regard. So maybe if we move away from these types of things and if we talk about it just in a more neutral language, I think that would be my response to this question. And I say this with a bit of a heavy heart, right? Because I do have a very strong scientific rational background. I wish there was a way that we could sit down and we could quantify this so that there can be a more substantive conversation on the practice of Reiki. And what I mean by that is something that would be maybe to a wider audience, maybe something that's a little bit more approachable to people who are skeptical of the practice. Because the antithesis of that is seeing people who are wholly embracing a metaphysical side of the practice, and then that turns off people who are skeptical of the practice, of course, because then it just puts it back into the camp of metaphysical stuff and whatever, and that's not a problem. I'm not saying that that's wrong as well. There's obviously Reiki has a lot of metaphysical roots. It's the language. If we can, in Buddhism, it's skillful means. If we can find the language to convey the practice in a way that is acceptable to as wide of an audience as possible, I think that's how we can do our best job in that regard. He's scooting around the base of the bed with his claws on the side of the bed, mopping the floor. Okay. He's just a maniac right now. It's the witching hour, as it is. All right, so I hope that helps everybody onto that question. If anybody has anything that you would like to add to that, please, of course, feel free. But I'll move into the next questions as well. This one was not completely fleshed out. Julian Maui, I think this one is coming from a group in the Philippines, practicing Reiki at home or around family. And that's all that it was. So I don't know how to, I think what that would maybe be how do you cultivate a peaceful place to practice? How can you, maybe if your family is skeptical, I get this a lot. Maybe a lot of you get this a lot as well. Like people in your family or your immediate circle, they don't believe in Reiki or they think it's super, whatever out there. They're just not open to it. We can't change anybody else. The only person we can work on is ourselves. So if I think going back to the first question, it has in many ways to do with how we talk about Reiki, how we present Reiki. Reiki is not something relegated to the mat. Reiki is not something relegated to your practice. It's relegated to everything you do in the day. So as you live a more peaceful life and as you live a more grounded life and a more neutral life, which our practice helps us to cultivate, then people around you will feel that. They'll see the change. They'll see the difference that it makes in you. And then that would be where somebody might be like, hey, what is like Reiki, this thing that you love so like, what is that? Okay, so that's somebody just opening up the crack of their door of skepticism to hear a potential discussion. And that needs to be treated with the utmost of care, right? It's not my goal or my desire to convert anybody to practice Reiki because that doesn't make any difference. My goal is to practice Reiki for myself. Everything else is a byproduct of that. And so if somebody is skeptical, I've had many people in my family who are skeptical, especially with cultural differences because I'm American, but I live in France. So there's some cultural differences as well, which have been quite interesting. This kind of bridging that gap, the way I've done it is I'm like, yeah, maybe the best way would just be to come and sit with me. It's kind of like meditation. We just sit together. And, if you want, then I can put my hands on you and show you what Reiki is or not. We can just sit together as you like. And that's usually enough. And people are like, wow, that was really peaceful or whatever. And then I can continue from there if they're interested. So I think that's kind of how I would approach that. Heidi, thank you for this. So a lot of people, the shift from one-to-one Reiki to distance seems to be a real challenge. Yeah, this is a really good question. And please, everybody, if you can unmute and chime in on this as well, because I think a group response on this is going to be really beneficial. For a lot of people, the shift from doing in-person, one-on-one Reiki sessions to a distance-based Reiki practice seems to be a real challenge. Is there any experience or encouraging words or whatever that can help people to understand how distance Reiki works? I can share my thoughts on that, but please, anybody else who would like to chime in, please do. For me, some of the things that I say is I try to bring it to as real of a context as possible by giving real framework. So people all have these somewhat quantifiable moments in their life where, and what I mean by that is, of course, we can put anything up to chance and we can say hindsight's 2020 and we're creating story here. I get that. But these moments where somebody's going to call you and then they call, or if you're a parent and you have a feeling about your kid and it was true, you have premonitions, if you're psychic, any of these types of things, we can all say that those are, maybe it's just coincidental and we're only cherry picking. Okay, that's fine. One thing that is statistically proven, and it's quite interesting though, is twins. And I use this example all the time. Twins, even twins who are separated across the planet, can quite often be wearing the same clothing every day. They can feel the same color of clothes, for instance, without even knowing it. They can feel when each other are in pain. They can feel like one person can break a leg and the other one will feel like they've broken the leg. Like this has been repeated and shown. We can't prove it scientifically because obviously scientifically it doesn't make sense, but it's been shown nonstop, and probably you would know somebody. I for sure know people in my life factually who do this all the time, and I've seen it many times, and it's quite eerie, to be honest. Like I had in some friends of mine back in the day, there was a twin that was living in Australia, and then one of them was in the United States. And almost every single time that there was just a long running joke that they would jump on the phone, the ladies would be wearing the same thing. And I don't mean like, oh, I've got a gray sweatshirt on and Core has a gray shirt on. I don't mean it like that. I mean like ridiculously specific clothing, like maybe with tassels that are the same rainbow colors or something, like very, very specific. And it would happen over and over and over again. These are ways that I open up a conversation about how the energy of the universe, of which everything is a part, you, me, the computer, everything, that is not bound by time and space. There is no limitation on that. And there's a great video of this from a scientific perspective for those of you who are in the United States, there's PBS. I just can't remember the name of it on YouTube, but there's a really good discussion about how light works, the quality and the quantity, or the nature of light. And the lady talking about it is the senior astrophysicist this is all from memory, but she should be the senior astrophysicist at the Natural History Museum in DC. And it's brilliant how she's talking about it. She's like, light is not bound at all by time and space. So what is happening on a photon of light here is the exact same thing that's happening on that photon of light at the edge of the universe. And it's happening at the exact same time because it's not bound by the construct of distance, which is in our mind. So it's universal and it's happening all at the same time. And there's a lot of other ways to talk about that. There's the dual nature of light and these types of things. And light is just an expression of daikomyo, or the energy of all things. And from light came all of this. Light is just energy in its purest form. And the form that we are is just that light, but in form. It's energy in form. So, how to explain that? When there was there's the Big Bang, right? That is how we believe that the universe had started, and still it's kind of holding up. So this is still where we think it would have been. And I'll just say this very, very briefly, but from the moment of zero time, like zero, nothing at all in the universe, to the moment where form began, there was light between this, right? Like in Genesis, it says God said, let there be light, and there was light, the spontaneous Om of the universe, the creation of the universe. This moment between zero time and Planck time, which is where the universe started to take on form, in that moment between those two very, very tight, moments in space time, it was just pure energy. And from that pure energy, everything came. So as energy expands, it can change form. It's one of the laws of the conservation of energy. And I'm saying all of these things because maybe something resonates with you about how to describe distance Reiki. If we are sitting here in our form, okay, this is my form right now, talking to all of you, paying attention to this maniac over here that may have calmed down by now. Let's see. So my form is busy, but this is my form right now. So Reiki helps me to change that form and make it become something more calm. And we all know how that feels, right? And so do we need to have hands-on? Do we need to be in person for that? No, we don't. We could close our eyes right now and engage in a Reiki practice, and we would all change form. Changing form is not good or bad. It's neutral. You know what I mean? We might change form, and many of you have probably experienced this. You go through your Reiki practice and a trauma comes up, a difficult situation comes to the surface. So you're changing into something that would be negative. It's not negative, it's you healing. So all of these approaches would be kind of ways that I talk about distance Reiki to others. The hard thing here again is to meet people where they are. So if somebody is super skeptical, I I love these. When I'm in Hong Kong, bless them. Hong Kong is a very stressful city. It's like living in a pinball machine. If anybody's been there, you'll know what I'm talking about. And I used to have these people come in and they would say this verbatim, and I loved it. It always made me smile. They would be like, Bruce, I don't give a shit what you do, what you think you do. Reiki, I don't believe in it. Reiki is garbage. I'm just here because my wife or my job or whatever told me I'm too stressed. So just do whatever you need to do. I'm like, that's awesome. You've got 45 minutes then to just relax. Just relax. Just get on the table and relax. And these people would be super type A, bankers, finance directors, lawyers, high stress, very analytical, very linear jobs. As soon as they had the opportunity to take off that armor, take off that facade, and actually rest, a whole universe would open up every single time. That's why before I gave this story, I laughed because every time somebody like that came in, and it's giving me chills right now because they would come in, the most ardent skeptic, this is garbage, I don't believe in it at all. 40 minutes later, they're like, I saw Quan Lin. Like, I don't understand what just like, yeah, well, it's because you relaxed, you let go of the defense, and you finally turned in to see a part of yourself that has always wanted you to see it. So we don't need to be there in person for these things to happen. It's just we need to figure out a way to discuss that with other people. I hope that helps on that. It's a tough one because it's very situationally specific. So Heidi, thank you for that. And if anybody else wants to chime in, please do. If anybody has anything to share to that or to add. Elaine, I think you need to unmute there.
Yeah.
There you go.
Hi. Um, what kept coming through for me while you were speaking is that when that high energy person comes in or is at a distance and you're going to give them a session, I think the thing that really works for them is being cared for. It's like you're just they know that you're spending the next half hour to an hour doing nothing but caring for them in some way.
Mm,
And that can be enough to make them relax to that degree.
yeah, that's so brilliantly put. We can just leave it right there at that. That's beautiful. Think about how many people don't get that in life at all. You know what I mean? At all. Yeah, Jeremy, thank you for that, Elaine.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for hosting this, Bruce. I got a couple ideas and a question too. This thing right here, the donut is like such a perfect example of the world, right? The material right here and the spiritual. Because when we eat the donut, the center's still there. And I just posted this thing about spiritual rebellion. We need spiritual rebellion with a vacuous center,
Mm,
right? That if I can find my own center, that emptiness, that aimlessness, pointless, meaningless thing that Bruce talks about, and just reside in that. And of course, like he says, it just comes and goes. But the goal is to do the breath work, to do the focus back in using the symbols, kotodama, whatever, to
mm,
get back to that stillness. And again, for me, it took sound healing. It took sound to get to silence. It took qigong or tai chi to get to movement, to get to stillness, to find the movement in the stillness and the stillness in the movement. And then there's a study I've seen on with rice about they labeled
mm,
rice that had been cooked with positive affirmations, negative affirmations, and indifference was the worst one, right? Like when
mm,
I just am indifferent, it was really decaying. And then my question is, can chi or ki prana be cultivated or generated? Because I've seen it where we've done qigong and I could feel the energy. And again, like when you go to Mount Kurama, you feel the energy. When people go to the Grand Canyon, they feel, and again, maybe it's just the beauty that inspires the awe and the wonder. But when you have, let's say Mecca, when you have, millions of people who visit a sacred site and pray and meditate, does it have the capacity to change the energy on a large scale?
Mm. Well, first off, thank you, Jeremy, for that. That study that you're talking about is a beautiful one, actually, and that's been replicated many times. If people haven't heard about this, it's controlling a lot of variables. So what it's in brief, it was a Japanese study first, and then it's been reproduced many times. You can do this at home as well. I did it in my classroom in Hong Kong when I was teaching high school as part of a philosophy class, and it worked. And there was all I needed to do was give kids a reason to scream at something and curse at it in class. And believe me, that thing took a lot of abuse. So what it is you take equal amounts of rice, you cook it with distilled water, and then you put it into a sealed jar in the same room with the same relative ambient lighting and temperature and all of that. And it's sealed, so there's no other humidity coming in. And one jar you give positive affirmations to, you respect it, you care for it, these types of things. One jar it's indifferent, and one jar you despise, you swear at it, and you treat it with negativity and everything. And always the jar of the negativity jar will rot and decay much faster. And the one that is respected and treated with care hardly decomposes at all over the same time frame. And so that's a very interesting, and that can be replicated, and all the variables can be held there. So to your question about chi being cultivated, I think it's both. I mean, it's hard for me to know on Mount Kurama how much of it is my expectation of Mount Kurama or how much of it is Mount Kurama. And it's probably both. It's not a coincidence that these things are there. Like the grandeur of the Grand Canyon. I mean, you would have to be a sociopath to just rock up there and think that that's not beautiful. Like you're not moved by that. I've never been to the Grand Canyon myself, actually, but I've been very close. But I don't mean that in such a harsh way, but maybe I do. Like when we can't help but to feel moved by these things, then we feel more of the love and the energy through us as well. It comes out and we turn into it. And in Mecca, yeah, I mean, so imagine that multiplied by 1 million. Then you've got 1 million pilgrims who are making a once in a lifetime journey to fulfill one of the pillars of Islam. I mean, how couldn't you be moved by that? That would be insane. But I think we can still cultivate all of that to the same level in ourself as well, because the chi, the prana, the ki, whatever you'd like to call it, that moves through everything is always moving through everything with the same flow. It's the natural world just doesn't resist it like we do. Like I've made in one of my recent YouTube videos, I was like, I wish I was more like this fence post. The fence post is enlightened. I'm not. The fence post, the rock is enlightened. I'm not, because I'm constantly sitting down to practice Reiki. The fence post isn't practicing Reiki. It's just being a fence post. So we need to be Reiki. We need to just be fully in that, right? And then we understand it more and let go further, like Jeremy was saying. So thank you for that. Yeah, Andres.
Yeah, well, what I also find very interesting is that I have experienced that distant Reiki can even work for the recipient when the sender didn't send it consciously. So perhaps he forgets or she forgets to send it, but the recipient feels the energy. So I think that's also very interesting, because what is important, I think, is the stillness, as Jeremy said, the stillness inside the person, which occurs and not something physical, which comes from a distant planet or a distant place.
Right.
Yeah, perhaps this is the most important thing.
Yeah, I think that hits the nail right on the head. If we are thinking in our practice, like my practice tonight, which will be maybe an hour or so after this call is finished, if I'm able to feel a deep level of stillness in that practice, okay, where I let go of myself, I let go of this call, I let go of my kitten, I let go of my life, I let go of everything. Okay, in that moment, then I'm simultaneously the entire universe. For those of you who have taken my courses, there's a book that I'm saying it because it's in my courses, but there's a book that I really, really love. It's called Each Moment is the Universe, and it's by a monk called Dainin Ketagari. Um, and that's what the book is about. You know, it's saying like if you can recognize a moment of stillness, then you can recognize in that moment that everything exists together in that moment, like the whole of the donut. There's simultaneously nothing, yet in nothingness, there's everything. It's complete. So this point on Andreas's comment here, if I sit down and I practice tonight and I become still, well, then that means the whole universe, past, present, and future is still. So that means in any Reiki session that I ever give or ever gave, there's also that stillness because in that moment, I'm still. So I think the beauty of this is the more that we can try our best to go back to a state of stillness, then that means all of the attachments that we carry, you know, like everything that we bring forward. I learned this in Reiki, or I've been practicing this long, or whatever, all of the belief that we have, we start to soften all of those beliefs. We start to let go of those beliefs. And so the more of those that we let go of, then maybe, I hope, I hope, the more readily available such depth of stillness will become. And so, you know, the only thing that I can try to do in my life, and I would say this reflexively for everybody listening, is to try to work on our own stillness. If we can be still, then the universe is at peace. That's it. That's it. And there's plenty of people who have Nelson Mandela, for instance, or the monk that set himself on fire in Vietnam. Like there's a million examples of people who have done this and found a very deep level of stillness in themselves. And that's the journey, right? So if I cultivate that stillness in me, and then if I was to say, now this might be a way to look at distance Reiki as well. Let's say that I was going to engage in a session with Andreas, and let's say I forgot Gyohagame and I was not doing my work honestly, so I just forgot to give him the session, which I wouldn't do. But let's just say that that happened. But the stillness that we cultivate in our practice would be enough to hold that space. It might be akin to people who listen to a mass by the Pope and are moved by that. The Pope can't personally address 2.5 billion Catholics. But if the Pope addresses himself, then all of those Catholics can be moved by that. If that's kind of a good enough analogy. I'm not sure if that hits the nail there, but thank you for all those. It's very good. Anybody else to add to that? I think that distance Reiki question is such an important one. Susan, yes, please.
I had a different question, not on the distance Reiki one though,
Sure.
but kind of what you were just talking about. And it's just a preference. This is not a political question. It's my personal practice question. With a lot of the turmoil going on, not only in the United States, but in the world. I mean, obviously there's a lot of suffering going on. So I find myself taking that suffering with me when I go into my practice in the evening.
Mm.
And while during the day, you know, I can do those things on a certain level that you limit the amount that you're exposed to. I can't deny that those feelings don't come up in me. There's lots of things going on here that people are angry about. So there's that, but normally, and I can get to stillness in my practice if I sit there long enough to let some of that go. Sometimes I notice, and of late, that I must be so like exhausted from it all that I end up just falling asleep, truthfully,
Mm-hmm.
through that. Through my practice, I'm in the middle of my practice and I just conk out. So I guess my question is, I was during one of your videos when you were talking about suffering and the I am, you know, letting go of the I. Can you elaborate just a little bit more on that? I ordered the discourses that you mentioned in one of your videos
Oh,
by Saint Germain.
uh-huh.
Just trying to just trying to find a way to get to let go of that a little bit sooner, so that it's part of my practice, I suppose. But I was wondering if you could just elaborate a little bit between the suffering and the I am, letting
Sure.
go of the I am, or letting go of the I, not the I am.
Well, I mean, we can turn back to the precepts as well to find some forgiveness here. That, koyodake wa ikaruna, koyodake wa shinpaisuna. These are the two things that we have to work so diligently in our waking life to keep at bay, because we're human. We're human. So there's always going to be something that makes us angry or that we get worried about. Probably an infinite amount of those things per day, actually. So we have agency over a lot of that. Yes, you can stop watching the news. You can stop being around people that are toxic or, gossipy or whatever. And those are all I think, very meaningful things to do. Um, the news, none of that is helping. I don't understand any of that, because it's just fueling worry and fear. And if it's not being informed, is not helping at all. It's just because it's not actually being properly informed. It's not real anyway. So, so if we turn away from these types of things and work on cultivating more peace throughout the day, in whatever that may look like, well, then we can overcome a lot of those obstacles. But I think always remembering that we will get angry and we will get worried, for sure. Uh, and everything that falls under the umbrella of those things. In the discourses that you ordered there, it's that in volume number 3. And I'm not sitting here and giving a badge to the Saint Germain Foundation. I think I've never seen anything. I've been a member of it in the past, but maybe it's a cult, maybe it's hierarchical. I'm not sure. I honestly, at 100% honestly, I've not seen it. I've gone to the temple in Chicago many times, and I thought it was very beautiful. But all of that stuff aside, in volume number 3, the bit that struck me, the sentence that quite literally changed my life, was that discussion on when you say, I am sick, how can you possibly be sick? If you are the energy of the universe, and if I am when you say I am, it's the most powerful thing possible. Because Susan, from your perspective, we are all figments of the projection of your universe. And from Core and from Ellen, everybody in here, everybody who is seeing their reality, we are all a projection of it. You are a projection of my universe. And so from any one of our kind of atomic, myopic views on the universe, there's no way to say that this universe isn't just my creation, for instance. There's no way to say that. And this is a common tenet in Buddhism. It's a common tenet in philosophy. Like, we talk about this. It's quite well talked about. So if that's the case, if I'm the creator of this reality, then how could I possibly be sick? Makes no sense. How could I possibly, it's like one of the 10 commandments is to not use the Lord's name in vain, right? Because the Lord's name is your name. You are the Lord. So why would you shoot your own foot? Why would you know, why would you nobody would go, unless you're really in a dark place. Like, I don't think anybody, in their own, like, if they're alone, they don't walk into the bathroom and look in the mirror and just start talking negatively about their reflection. Unless you're in a really dark place, right? I mean, and there's other things to talk about, but it just wouldn't make any sense. Nobody would do that. So anything that you say after the phrase "I am" it has the power to literally change the universe if you take what I'm saying as being logical or true. And the caveat to this whole line of thinking is there's no way to disagree with it, at least none that I've ever heard that are convincing, because everything is a function of my mind. If I went brain dead in the next couple minutes, hopefully I don't, hopefully, but if I do, then I guess it was it. That's it. Good enough ride. Thank you, everybody. But if I do, then there's no way for me to have any awareness of any of this because there's no context for me to understand it. So, end of discussion, right? So, if I'm saying that I am, and if we're talking about negativity, then anytime that you would say something like, I am sick, I am angry, I can't believe that this politician won, I can't believe that there's war, I can't negative, I can't positive, I can't anything, then you're projecting into the realm, right? This is, I'm sure, I don't know this is a fact, but I'm sure that this is why so many spiritual seekers, spiritual leaders, saints, sages, these types of people, they just close their mouth at some point. They go into silence. Because if you're not saying anything, and I was thinking about this the other day actually, because in India, in a lot of religions, to be fair, here in France, we do it. Just right next to where I'm living is the Compostelle, the hike to Spain. So you can walk all the way from like Paris to Spain. And you know, in every religion, there's something where people take a vow of silence and just walk. They just go out into the great unknown and they just surrender. And really, I think what's happening here is people are like, yeah, I've spent my whole life trying to believe that everything is a projection of myself. This whole universe is just a projection of myself. And so now I'm going to finally trust it. I'm going to sell everything that I have. I'm going to give up everything. And I'm just going to go out like Gandhi with the rags on my back and walk and let the universe take care of me. Because that's my full trust that this is actually what it is. And it's, I think, kind of the same thing. So if we look at I am, meaning I am the creation of all of this, well, then it helps us to change our speech. It helps us to follow the noble path, right? The Eightfold Noble Path in many ways. It's hard. I mean, it's hard when it's a lot easier to say these things when you're in a peaceful situation, obviously. Let's not kid ourselves. And it's a lot easier to say this when you have your basic needs being met. Let's not kid ourselves, right? But the example that I just gave, there's plenty of people who forego all of their basic needs and who throw themselves into the uncertainty of discomfort and just walk. There's plenty. I mean, if you go on YouTube and you look up any kind of Buddhist monk, famous Buddhist monks, you know, in Nepal or India, whatever, they probably all have done that. And very, very famous ones. Maybe they've walked for, 10 years, seek silence for 20 years. I can't remember the name of this was awesome. There's a guy, a prophet in the United States. Can't remember his name now, but if you look this up, he refused to use anything that was fossil fuel based, and he took a vow of silence for like 25 years. So when people were like, oh my God, can you come and speak at our university? Yeah, sure, but I'll have to walk. so he would just walk all the way across the country without any food, without any water, without speaking. He just had a little sign. If you type in the things I'm telling you, you'll find who I'm talking about. It's completely inspiring. So he would walk like 9 months to get to Harvard to give a lecture where it's just him typing on a PowerPoint because he doesn't talk. That's incredible. Because really what he's saying is, I am that like I am, and then the whole of the donut. As Jeremy said, nothing. I am nothing, like zero after that. If we can strive towards that, simply I am, well, you are what? Nobody's going to gravitate back. If you have the choice, you won't gravitate back towards negativity. And hopefully, you won't gravitate towards positivity either. You'll gravitate towards neutrality. Because neutrality is the middle path, right? Positivity will lead to suffering at some point. Always. It always does. The party stops at some point, and then you have a hangover. So there you go. That's how it works in real life.
Thanks, Bruce.
Yes. I hope you enjoy that book. That's for me, it was quite impactful.
Thank you.
Let's see. Deborah, yes, thank you. Can you speak more about using Fudo Myo in meditation? When, for how long, and the meaning of the words? Yes, so Fudo Myo is one of the deities central to Japanese Buddhism. It's central to Buddhism. He's Anchala in Chinese and Indian Buddhism as well. So Fudo is represented of the courage to burn your, like to face yourself. Let me give a better example of this, an example that might make more sense. And I've said this many times. So, is there anybody who is a Star Wars, like, has anybody seen Empire Strikes Back? I would hope. Jeremy, thank you. Anybody else? Yes, Andreas. Okay. Lori, thank you. So, in Empire Strikes Back, there is a beautiful scene where Luke, in his full childish naivety, is learning from Yoda. And Yoda's like, Jesus, this guy, like, would you just please? You know, he's not listening because Luke is a kid in this moment. He's got the naivety of youth. And there's the scene where he has to go face his own darkness in the cave. This is part of his training. And the beautiful wisdom from Yoda is, you know, Luke grabs his belt with his gun and his lightsaber and all that stuff. And Yoda's like, you don't need your weapons. And Luke's like, yeah, whatever. And he takes them on and he goes in and fights himself. So Yoda's like, okay, well, you're going to have to learn that you don't need your weapons. Your weapons are a crutch. You're going to have to face yourself with yourself. That's the only thing that you need is yourself. A gun might break, a lightsaber might not turn on. So if you rely on anything else, those things will fail. That's the point, I think, in my opinion. Fudo is helping us, Fudomyo is helping us to recognize that the only thing we need is in ourself. And so Fudo is quite often depicted as this really ghastly kind of pig-faced demon that is either standed or seated with a big flame behind him. His face is meant to look really shocking. It's meant to look scary because it's not the face of the deity, it's your face. It's your face to face yourself, the darkness in yourself. You know, you don't face the darkness in yourself like, oh, please, like, can we just, maybe we can work this out. Like, that's not how it's going to work. We have to attack the things that are holding us back. So when we look at Fudo, when we listen to the chant of Fudomyo, then we can be inspired by the power of and the image and the symbolism. And like we were saying previously, in this idea that in any moment that you recognize your practice, the entire universe exists. So when we are fully chanting to Fudo or to Amitabha Buddha or to Jesus or whatever, to yourself, doesn't make any difference. In that moment, you are chanting simultaneously with everybody who has ever chanted to that same thing. So there's a really powerful depth to a lot of these mantras. And I include it in my courses, and it's on my YouTube channel. You can watch it for free. Obviously it's there for that reason. So when you sit with it, it's supposed to sound heavy and it's supposed to sound not dark or scary, but it's supposed to sound big because you need, in order to face your deepest, darkest bits, you need every bit of courage and strength that you can muster. And if you look at the face of Fudo, nobody's going to mess with that face. So if you can become Fudo, then nothing that you're holding on to is going to be able to mess with you anymore. So the chant is essentially just calling out to the great wisdom king to help you to not enshrine or not to ensnare things, but to bring to the surface your suffering so that it can be burnt and cleansed in the fire. So for me, when do I use that chant? You know, if I have a Reiki practice that's going really difficult, like sometimes it's Reiki or psychedelic practices or whatever that are just pretty heavy. They're pretty difficult, right? Maybe a lot of anxiety is coming up, maybe a lot of anger comes up, or whatever. Then I might just flip that on because I need help. I need to have that strength. I need to just hear that, the power of that mantra, of that chant. So to repeat the words or to just listen as you like, that particular chant that I have on the YouTube channel is, I think it's very easy to memorize because it's only 7 lines. It's probably about 15 words. It's in Japanese, but it's not very difficult. You can chant along with it or you can just listen. That's fine. Now, this one, and I'll give an example about this, about how I was just completely blown away. We're talking about people with depth of practice and these types of things. And this is going to Deborah's question, but this was probably the most significant moment in my spiritual trajectory to date. Okay, so it was on last year's pilgrimage in Japan. And this year, it looks like we'll be repeating it again, which is going to be incredible. It was a moment with Ajari Sama on Mount Hiei, who's a living incarnation of Fudo-myo. So revered as a living god or a living incarnation of Fudo. And we went into the temple, and there's a private fire ceremony for us. So he's, holding this Goma ceremony. And then one of the nuns was like, okay, so now everybody just please go in Gosho and bow your head and close your eyes. And Ajari Sama then takes on the form of Fudo-myo. So here's this perfectly placid, peaceful, jovial monk, making jokes. Hasn't been off the mountain in this part of Mount Hiei for 13 years. So he was telling us how, like, he has no contact with his family, his friend, nothing at all. He lives in recluse with the small group of monks and nuns that are in this sect on Mount Hiei. And he was like, I only knew that the Shinkansen was built when one day on my practice, I just saw it shooting by. I didn't even know what it was. So he's been there for 13 years. So I'm saying all of that because his depth of practice is astronomical. And we all bowed our head, and he started chanting the chant of Fudo-myo, and we were chanting along with it. And it was the energy and the power that he brought into that space. Like Jeremy was saying, the people on the Hajj, for instance, when you're surrounded by that, like, my energy just was elevated to a point where we had to wear masks because, like, the COVID mask, because the guy doesn't have access to a doctor at all. So he can't get sick. So we had to have these masks on and stuff. And I was like, this is so intense. I can't breathe. So, like, I had to, like, calm down, and then I could chant again and calm down and chant again and everything. It was transcendental. It was as if the real meaning of the power of looking at yourself and burning it was there. And it was one of the first times, for sure, at that level that I'd ever experienced it. And I'm saying at that level, but you can experience it with the mantras as well. Just sitting with it, with repetition, making it part of your practice. Then that moment, and every moment that he has practiced, and everybody else that has gone before him, that will be there for you in your practice as well. If you surrender yourself into it, if you fall into the depth of it. And so in the YouTube video, what I say is, like, for me, in a dark room, as loud as you can possibly put it up, and just be with it. And if it gets scary, good, it's supposed to get scary. That's the point. It's not scary, like, it's not a criticism of anybody. It's not like, that's not what I'm saying at all. It's supposed to get scary because the darkness that we hold on to, that everybody wants to let go of, it's going to present itself in a scary way because it wants to be let go of as well. There's a beautiful discussion, I think, about this, of the way that angels and devils, in biblical terms, present themselves to us. So this is in, like, in the Bible and some sects of Christianity. A true angel will present itself as a demon, and a demon will present itself as a seducer. So, and why is that? Like, the true angel wants the attachments to be scared out of us, so that we can succumb to our true nature, our true daikomyo self. The devil wants to seduce you into complacency and submission, right? And attachment and laziness and all these other things. So this is why Fudo looks like a devil, but represents the depth of the compassion of the universe. And I think it's really beautiful. The duality there is really beautiful and very, very powerful. So I hope that helps there, Deborah. Thank you for that question. And yeah, I'm really, I can't wait for this to be experiencing that again coming up in May. It's going to be incredible. All right. Anybody else? And I can go back to the questions that we have. But please chime in. There's a really good one here from Teresa Kirkwood on the Facebook group. Discussing the Byosen would be good. I often hear or read people struggling with understanding the sensation or even feeling nothing at all. and then they question their ability to practice Reiki. Yes. Scanning the Byosen is a fundamental component of Usui Reiki Ryoho. We can feel, we can experience disturbances or blockages. I can't even say it, but because I don't like these languages, I don't like, as many of you probably know by now. This is all a function of our mind, but we can still feel these types of things. So, for instance, right now I've got an upset stomach. So, because I ate something bad yesterday, I think. But if I hold my stomach, then I'm starting this feedback loop. Oh, the Byosen. Oh, because I know this thing. Oh, because, and I'm just furthering the attachment to the story of the suffering, right? Whereas in reality, if I was to just sit with my practice, yeah, that's okay, fine. It's there, irrelevant. Neutrality, neutrality, neutrality. Oh, it's getting worse. That's cute. Fudomyo, neutrality, right? Stay with neutrality. If we scan the Byosen and we feel something, that's beautiful. And then it's our ability in our moment to try to seek neutrality, in my opinion. You know, like if I was working on somebody and I could, with 100% certainty, if I could scan their body and I could feel the thing that they haven't told me about at all, but it's there and it's real, let's just say, okay, let's say that there it is. That person has an ailment. I had no idea about it. They know about it. And now I feel it with the Byosen. That's very likely. And most of you can probably do that. In that moment, if, in my opinion, if we make conversation that furthers the attachment, if we draw attention to it, if we do anything but try to hold neutral space on the Byosen, then we're furthering the attachment to that suffering. So here's the example that the first time I was seeing this, I think so beautifully, was in Hong Kong at maybe some of you have heard me say this before, but there's an Usui Reiki Ryoho center in Hong Kong. And luckily I had gone there for the first time after practicing Reiki for a while and had gone to Japan, because if I'm not, I would have been like, this is a joke. These people are complete fraudsters. Because I went in and it was like all these cute old Japanese women and they bowed in gosho. You know, there's one person laying on the table or like on some tatami mats. I think it was on some mats on the floor, and there was like six. It was like a Reiki share, so like six people working on one person. They would all bow in gosho. They would do their self attunements and stuff like that, get ready, and then they would put their hands, and then they would just start gossiping about the weather in Hong Kong and start talking to each other and everything. And I'm like, man, that's brilliant, because what they're doing is they're trying to distract them from themselves from the. This is what they told me as well. They're like, yeah, we feel these things. We don't want to attach to them. So it's way easier for me to feel this and, oh yeah, there it is. Instead of that, hey, Core, so how's the weather going for you? How's everything? Like, I don't care about what he says. He doesn't care about what I'm saying. We're trying to distract each other from our own attachment, if that makes sense. And it was a really beautiful way to see Reiki being, I'm not saying it's the right way to practice Reiki, but it was a beautiful way to see the attachments projected out. Now, with the circles in Japan, the hands are just placed and there is no scanning. People feel something and you can see when they feel it because they sink down deeper. They try to let go even further, you know, and you can see it. You can see it with my teacher. You can see it with the people who are at the Reiki shares. You can see it where they can, for sure, they feel something. And I've asked Inamoto a couple times. I've been like, Inamoto sensei, like, you know, when you felt that, what do you do? He's like, felt what? Yeah, exactly. Felt what? Exactly. Because he's like, don't even, why are you asking me that? Don't ask. Just continue on. We'll feel it again and again and again, which means we need to surrender again and again and again. So you can scan, you can feel, and that's great. Use your intuition. And then, in my opinion, hold that space until it loses its meaning. You know? But if we further its meaning, then we further the suffering. And this is something that I think the Western Reiki world gets wrong a lot. A lot. A lot. Like, I don't think there's any reason to discuss sessions after. I don't think there's any benefit to saying what you felt, what you experienced. There's benefit to asking people, in my opinion, how their session went. How did they feel? Because they need to see the things that they faced on themselves. But it's not for me to interpret that. And it's not for me to judge. It's not for me to guide. It needs to be that person's journey. So if we scan for the Byosen and then we start doing all these Western New Age things on it, then we are not letting them do their journey of their healing. For me, my journey has been overcoming, one of my journeys has been overcoming, as I'm sure many of you by now have heard me say, health anxiety and crippling panic attacks and so on, right? So if somebody, it used to be so bad that when I would close my eyes and people would put their hands on me, I was like, that's it, they're going to kill me. Like, that's the level of insane anxiety that I used to have. Like, the most caring people are putting their hands over me, and I'm like, they're going to kill you, dude. That's it. Like, hey, got a long way to go up this mountain here. So the worst thing that anybody could do, if that's my level of like base anxiety, you know, then the worst thing that anybody could do would be to interpret how they felt that after the session. Because now I'm just going to leave a Reiki session with a million other tangents for my anxiety to find peace with, you know, and to, to just take story in. So it's better to just be like, okay, Bruce, how did you feel? Oh, I felt like you were going to kill me. Oh, that's interesting. Did it go away? Like, do you still feel that way? No? Oh, okay, good. I'm glad, because I had no intention of doing that, but you know, that's how you felt. These are things that are coming up, right? So it's a long-winded response on that, but it's a very important one, I think, because when we scan the Byosen and we attach to it, then we suffer. That's it. It doesn't mean that you shouldn't do it. It doesn't mean that it's not part of the practice. It is. The question is, how do you work with it from there? In my opinion. So I hope that helps. All right. Anybody else? Anybody have any questions on that or anything? All right. So the next one here, from the same lady, Teresa Kirkwood, was the importance of a regular daily practice and the basic foundation of what this should include, as many fall out quite quickly of their daily practice and then they get lost along the way. That's a great question. What do your daily practices look like? Who would like to chime in and tell me, what do you guys do? Because there's not one way to answer that, right? There's not one correct reply. And I don't want to say like mine is the right way to practice. So who would like to share? Anybody? Well, then I'll share how mine is. When I sit down every night, I try to do it every night, and I bet many people can resonate with this. I try to do it every night, and I practice almost, if not every night, just because it feels so good. It feels so good to just let go and just find peace, you know? So why wouldn't we want to do that? It resonates with me. It's my journey with the practice, so I love it. So it's something that I actively look forward to. Maybe it doesn't resonate as strongly with other people. That's fine. It would be a thing that helps us carve out a moment in our day to cultivate peace. So the way that I would first reply to Teresa's point was, it doesn't matter if Reiki is not your thing. Many of you have many things. I have many things. Jeremy was talking about Tai Chi and Qigong and sound and all of that. Maybe that's the practice for the day. The only thing that I think matters is, are you doing something on a regular basis that helps you turn in and create neutrality in yourself, cultivate that space in yourself? That might be walking, it might be poetry, gardening, cooking, it doesn't matter, painting, it doesn't matter what it is. All of those things are your Reiki practice. So I think that gives people a lot of latitude to do their work honestly. You might be brand new to Reiki, you might be just coming out of Shoden, and you might have heard a lot of grandiose things about the practice, and you might not be experiencing them in your first 5 or 6 sessions on yourself in your 21 days. Just do your work honestly. It doesn't matter what other people experience. It matters what you experience. That's it. So, and the only thing that really matters is, are you more peaceful? Are you more comfortable, more calm after you do that thing, be it Reiki, painting, whatever it might be, than before? If yes, then that's your practice. Reiki is the practice of living a peaceful life. It's Ansen Ritsumei. That's the point of the practice. So when we actually sit on the mat, maybe that's the most irrelevant moment of our practice in many ways. you know. If you want to see the depth of my practice, you should see me when I have to go negotiate at like a hardware store in France when they're only open for an hour and a half, and then they're on a 4 hour lunch break, and then there's a strike, and then everything. So that's when my practice really it really needs to shine, not when I'm in my comfortable little Reiki space. That's not the practice in many ways, you know. So daily practice, though, it's cultivating a peaceful life. That's it. And if I look back, and I'm sure all of you can do this as well, you can look back on your journey with the practice, and it should be night and day. The more you practice, the further away from the past you become, right? And that older version of you no longer looks like anything you can resemble or understand anymore. And how beautiful is that? How incredible is that? Like, how it's amazing that I can go to a Reiki session and I no longer think people are going to kill me. That's beautiful. That's like, and you know, I'm saying that as a bit tongue in cheek. I'm saying that as a bit, it's a little bit silly, I know, but in reality, that's anxiety for you. It's irrational anxiety. And a lot of people have it. So my practice has cured me of that for sure. And like, who wouldn't want to get rid of these things? So that's why daily practice to me is so, not even like, it's not alluring, it's not comforting, it's just part of my day at this point, because it's just part of my day. There's no other way to say it. So does anybody want to share on their practice? Or move on to the next question?
I'll jump in real quick.
Thank you,
I
Jamie.
used to resist and have an aversion to laundry. And there have been moments because I have clients and we use massage table and I have lots of sheets, and I've had moments where the folding of the laundry has become very meditative as a practice. Now, if I could just learn how to do that with the dishes, because I love to cook, I just hate dishes, man.
There it is. The next avenue for practice, the next focus. That's awesome. So one thing, one thing to that question as well was asking about like, what does it look like? And I said, there's nothing that I can say about how my practice looks. And I can kind of build that off of Jeremy's comment there, I think. I wonder, do you fold the towels? Do you fold the sheets in the exact same way every way? Do you fold them like, is it become a meditative state of perfection? Is it like a calculated, methodical, or you're just getting it?
Yes and no. It's weird. I don't have like the exact, like I don't start with the exact, because it's rectangle, so they end up different, but they're definitely methodical.
Mm-hmm. There you go.
I get really into it.
That's a perfect way to put it. That's perfect. When we sit down for our practice, sometimes it's going to be rectangular, sometimes it's going to be square, but you sit down for your practice and you face what you have on your table at that moment, right? And so maybe that means the hand placements, maybe it doesn't. Maybe it means chanting the symbols, the precepts, whatever resonates for you. Maybe it means giving a prayer. Maybe it means having an animal with you, doesn't matter, right? Whatever it is in that moment that helps you find and cultivate peace. That's it. That's what we do in that moment. So for me, when I sit down for my practice, it's really that I sit and I wait. I wait. So I bow and gosho, because absolutely when I sit for my practice, I am not peaceful. I'm gonna be very clear, I'm not peaceful. And I don't mean that like I'm negative. I mean that like none of you are peaceful right now because you're listening. You're actively engaged in something. So I have to bow and gosho and I wait. So already I can feel. Is that enough? Then if it's enough, I just simply sit my hands in my lap and I wait. It'll come. At least for me, it's only a matter of time and something will come. My mind will get distracted. The cat will come. I'll hear something. It doesn't make any difference. There's a billion distractions that my mind will throw at me from every possible angle. And in all of those distractions, I do my best to try to wait to the best of my ability. And when I can no longer wait, when it's too difficult, Maybe that's when I go into the hand placements. I don't use the hand placements in the exact order. It's wherever you feel you need them, just place your hands, surrender, and smile, like Inamoto says. I think is the best way to look at it. All right, let me see some of these questions here. Heidi, thank you. Something for me about working on not feeling I'm getting it wrong. Yes. Okay. That's a great point. There's this, Reiki we can't get wrong. As long as we are, how do I want to say this? If our attachments lead us, if our mind leads us, then we're not practicing Reiki at some point. But what I'm saying about it, not that we can't practice it wrong, is because I would be the biggest hypocrite if I was saying that at the beginning of, like, if I just took what I just said and went back to Bruce when I was starting my practice in 2005 or whatever it was, the difference there would be night and day. I was taught in a Western approach. I mean, at one point I called myself a grandmaster, so there you go. So, there's all of these areas to grow and to expand. And we all take that journey. We all walk that path. And so it's not that this is the trajectory of everybody when you learn anything in life. So I think when we believe that we are doing something wrong or that we're worried about not doing something correctly, that's actually a super honest approach to the practice. That's where you probably want to be. Self-doubt and self-questioning are beautiful, especially when it becomes centered around your Reiki practice, because then to me, the self-doubt is always, hold on a second, is that furthering my attachment or is it helping me to release my attachments and my mind? Okay. And I poke fun at the things that I've done in the past. Of course, I think everybody should, because it shows that you learn, you grow, you evolve with the practice, and that it's beautiful to make mistakes. It's beautiful to grow through that. There's a quote that I love. I think it was from Zen, the Dogen, the Zen master Dogen, who created Zen Buddhism. Yeah, it was. And it was a Zen master's life is one continuous mistake. I think is such a beautiful quote to live by with our practice. So if we can always have a worry that am I doing it right? Am I doing it right? If the idea of right is towards stillness, then I think that's Gyohagame in action. I think that's really beautiful and really honest. As long as am I doing it right means, is there a way for me to try to cultivate even more stillness in this? Maybe one breath, maybe 1 minute, maybe 1 hour, or maybe tomorrow. It doesn't matter. Maybe today's too difficult. So softness. And that's what I mean. We can be soft on our own mistakes. We can be soft on when today is going to be too difficult, when your practice is too hard, when you've just had enough. Whatever, healing is not a smooth trajectory, right? Letting go of your attachments is not a smooth trajectory. It's going to be bumpy. There's going to be turbulence. So when that turbulence comes up, that type of honesty and humility will ensure that you continue on your journey, in my opinion, right? Whereas the antithesis of that would be to start calling yourself a grand wizard and a healer and a mystic and all these types. And you're just getting stuck in your own entrapment of healing. And I think that's been going backwards in many ways. So thank you for that, Heidi, if you're still here. Thank you. No, but that was a very good question. I appreciate it. Yes, you are still here. Yes, thank you. All right, let's see. Yes, Sharon, indeed, the practice is fluid. Whatever you need that day is your practice. Wherever you are that day, that's your practice, right? And we can learn from everything around us as well. We can learn from the environment around us when we can see that everything in the natural world is in its practice already. Like we can get inspiration from the trees when they bend in the wind. They don't resist it. They don't fight back. So when life gives you wind, you bend with it, you move with it to the best of your ability. Reiki helps us do that because our natural instinct is to fight, to hold, to resist, to create stories, where Reiki helps us soften all of that physical attachment and resistance. So we can recognize that it was actually just wind. There's nothing else in the day, you know, even when it seems difficult. Like, did you have a bad childhood? Did whatever? That's wind, right? Because right now is not that moment. And so right now it's just an attachment. So it needs to pass like the wind through the trees, you know, and that can be very profound. It can be very beautiful to see that. All right, let's see. Next question. Thank you, everybody, for these questions. Got about 30 more minutes or so. I really appreciate these. Elaine, I have a question here from another Elaine, I think, in the Usui Reiki Ryoho group. Let's see. If intention to heal is a specific ailment or from, sorry, 1 second. Hard to read with this little kitten here. If intention to heal a specific ailment for another is not part of our Usui Reiki Ryoho practice, then what are we actually telling potential clients that we are doing for them, if anything? This is a big question. And if we are not telling them anything specifically, how do we engage in others in what we do? Elena, that was your question there?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yes. This is a big question. So when I take clients in person, and usually that's in Hong Kong when I'm working back at the clinic, when people come in, and maybe some of you've heard me say this, I think it's in my courses as well. I might ask them, I might say, Elaine, you know, what brings you in for Reiki today? And you might be saying a number of things that brought you in or whatever. And that's to build some rapport and it's to build the container of trust and safety and security and all those types of things. I'm trying my best to not remember, yeah, my shoulder hurts. My friend had Reiki, they helped them a lot. So I thought, you know, I've got a bad shoulder. Maybe you can help me with it. Okay. But I'm trying my best not to remember that, if that makes sense, because of all the things that we've covered already in the discussion today. If I'm working on the client and they've told me that their shoulder is, you know, in pain or whatever, then if I focus on that, then in some ways, unless my mind is neutral, then I'm furthering the attachment. So if I can be fully neutral, that's great. But simply because they told me that my shoulder hurt and now I'm on the shoulder, that means that I'm not being neutral automatically. There's some thread of awareness that is still keeping me to be not. Now, it could be a very thin one. It could be I'm still being quite neutral, hopefully, but still not totally neutral. So I try to let go of all those things. And then at the end of the session, you know, so I might say it like this. All right, Elaine, come on back. How did you go? How was your session? How did you experience? What did you experience? Whatever. And again, there's these beautiful sessions where people come back. They're like, nope, nothing. Didn't feel anything. Jeremy, you're laughing. I wonder if you've had, yeah, no, nah. Like, wow, nothing. Yeah. So nothing at all. Like you didn't experience anything. No, yeah, actually, like I saw this portal opened up and I saw this other universe and I went into it and I was there and like my family was there and everything. And it was like an out of body experience, like a near death. Wow. Okay. So nothing happened then. So have you ever had that before? Is that normal for you? Nope. Never happened before. Oh, okay. Okay. What does it mean to you? What impact did it have on you? Did it give you clarity? Did it help you understand anything? And then I often say this, I don't need to know this. You can think about it. This can even be a rhetorical question. If you would like to talk about it with me, if you would like to what I mean by that is vocalize it, then you're very welcome to. But in reality, let it sit with you, you know, ruminate over it, write it down, maybe journal about it if you want later on, whatever will help you seek greater clarity from your experience. That's the most important thing. So does it help you navigate through something you're looking for clarity on? Does it help you understand something you're holding on to or a moment in your life or whatever? That's for you to decide. So what I'm hearing is you had this kind of out of body experience. You had this portal opened up. You've never seen that before. And I'll just restate the things that they've said because that repetition helps it to land a little bit more, if that makes sense.
Um, okay. So somebody comes in and they say that their shoulder is bothering them. And we go through all this of neutrality. Um, and yet they've come to us with a specific. How is it honest? How is it an honest practice to be neutral and, have somebody say, okay, I had an out of body experience, but
Hmm.
it had nothing to do with their shoulder. And we're trying, I mean, trying is a bad word here, I know, but we're um, we're accepting money to help them with the issue that they came in with, and
Hmm.
yet not um, we're not even ourselves believing that we're not attached to that issue.
But
Whereas
yeah,
if
but
somebody comes into a massage therapist and says, my shoulder's bothering me, they're going to work the shoulder,
Mhm.
and it's probably going to loosen up.
Mhm.
So I guess that's the essence of my question.
Right. Okay, that makes sense. Well, first off, the shoulder issue, if there's a shoulder, like let's say the culmination of the pain is the shoulder, we don't know what that root cause ever can be. And you can say that maybe you pulled the muscle, and this goes into energetics as well, but okay, you pulled the muscle, you pulled the shoulder, but what was the root cause of that? Is it trying to, like in Chinese medicine, for instance, when I'm at the center in Hong Kong, we're never treating the expression of the issue. So they wouldn't treat the pulled shoulder. They would treat something else. They would treat the emotion behind it. They would treat the organ or the meridian. So that's really what I would be saying. If somebody, I've actually never had a question like that, any of my clients, because they've come back and when they're out of it, they're usually so relaxed or happy that it's fine. But if somebody was saying something, like, well, then what are you doing? My shoulder hurt. I came to see you for my shoulder. We have to understand that the movement of energy through the body is a holistic practice. It's a holistic understanding. And so Reiki is treating by neutrality, it's treating the whole of the system. And so from that, hi, Gabby. That was my cat, sorry. And so from the neutrality of the practice, then the thing that is causing the tension in the shoulder will naturally loosen up. It will naturally lessen the intensity of that trauma. So we can't lump Reiki into the same type of a practice as something like massage therapy because it's not the same. We're not doing something that is tactile, that is as physical as that. We can't lump it in with acupuncture or something that has a very physical uh, and potentially tangible result coming from it. What I mean by potentially tangible is, if you stimulate a meridian, then you'll probably be able to feel that. Now, Reiki can do the same thing. Quite often, when I'm in Hong Kong, I'll work with the Chinese doctors. When they have the needles in the client, I'll come and have Reiki with the client as well. And we'll be working on the same person with two modalities at the same time. Two modalities whose roads converge at the same hopeful endpoint, but that function via different mechanisms, if that makes sense. So I wouldn't say something, this is why I'm saying, like, if somebody comes in with a presented issue, okay, if they're in a lot of pain, if they really want me to hold the shoulder, then I might do that. I might hold the shoulder. I might be in that position for them because maybe they're going to need that. But then it's on me to try to be neutral. If if I was expressing with a lot of pain to a Reiki practitioner and they just held me in that pain, held the shoulder with that neutrality, and if they were neutral, then the pain will dissipate far quicker than if they had a story or if they had an attachment to it. If there was spectacle and all these types of things going on with it. You know what I mean? So for me, when I'm working on somebody, if I know that the person's shoulder, for instance, in this case, I'll still use that as one of my standard hand placements for the session, but I won't try to dwell on that. I have a similar routine that I use just because it works. Probably everybody else has their routine as well. And in that routine, then my hands would for sure be on that point, you know, but I wouldn't stay there for 3 times as long simply because that's what they were presenting with, if that makes sense. Because the issue of the shoulder could actually be a lower back thing. It could be it could be because there's trauma in their knee, or what. I'm just making these up, but you know what I mean. There's a whole system that we need to look at here, not just the end result. So I hope that makes sense. And it's a great question. So please, if there's a follow-up, I think this is a very valuable thing to discuss.
May I just give some example, maybe?
Yes, please.
I think because the example was like the physical, like the shoulder, But I have an example that is personal example, and it's like 25 years ago, I was dealing with a post-traumatic stress. So you have to be neutral. You don't know how Reiki will heal this,
Hmm.
because you don't have any physical point. It is just there,
Right.
maybe like the Bruce was telling about his anxiety. There is no place of it. So you have to be neutral, and I'm not the same person anymore. It
That's
just
right.
went away somewhere along the road.
That's right. Jeremy, did you want to add to that? Add
I think there was a Chinese parable that talked about this town that had a drought, and they called out the water people and the engineers, and nobody could solve this drought. And then they called out a shaman, and the shaman just sat there for 3 or 4 days, and then left, and nothing happened. And the town people were like, "What just happened?" And then in a couple of days it rained, and they were like, "Wow, you did this." And he goes, "No, I just felt that disturbance inside of myself and sat with it." And I had a friend who called me up about, and I had not heard of this story, and I had gone to a hospital for a friend who had a tumor, and I couldn't really do much in the hospital. So I just sat with myself, and I could feel it. I could feel it in my head. And maybe it's my mind feeling it, but it was pretty obvious it wasn't mine. And I
Mm-hmm.
just sat with it. And they both had, so that distance part of things, I wasn't trying to do anything, but it was there. And again, I didn't ask where it was at on her. I didn't. I just was with that space of just working on my own
Yeah.
physical disturbance inside of me. If that helps clear anything up.
Yeah, those are great points to that. Ellen, do you have anything to follow up on that? Or does that help to clarify?
Yes, it helps a lot. It's just that, okay, as practitioners practicing on others, I guess my issue is how do we couch that to somebody who says to us, I was considering coming to you for Reiki because I have a back problem. So then do we say to them, I'm happy to sit with you and, uh, I'm still at a loss as to um, how I can honestly, um, I don't want to use the word sell, but how I can honestly couch how I am working, how I would work on this person, even though I know how I would work on him. How do I say it to them so that, because, people come to you and uh, they're kind of skeptical. It's not easy to get them to believe or understand or resonate with what we do attempt to offer them. I don't know where Bruce went.
I'm still here.
Oh, okay.
He's now
I'm
lost his
seeing your
mind, so
icon.
I had to get him out of the room. I couldn't take any more bites and nibbles and anything on my arm, so I had to get him out of the room. I was listening the full time, I promise.
Okay.
Another way that I talk about it is like this. And this is applicable for everybody. If I came to see any one of you for a Reiki session, then that would mean, hopefully, that your depth of stillness in your own practice, regardless of how long you've been practicing it, by the way, or how deep you can go into yourself, whatever, by the sheer nature of me wanting to see you for a Reiki session, it means that I want outcome. I want something. Peace, better feeling, healing, whatever it might be. So that automatically means that in theory or in reality, my internal turbulence, good or bad, it's the same thing, is most likely greater than yours because you're a space holder as the practitioner. Okay. So if I come in with that turbulence and I meet your stillness, which one wins? Stillness always wins. And energy always moves from disordered to ordered. Like heat will always dissipate into neutrality. Everything will seek neutrality. So the shoulder will be a state of disorder or lack of neutrality. And in the state of a Reiki session, then your hopeful neutrality will be greater than the disorder or the attachment of the shoulder. And then what happens is the person's disorder will become your neutrality. So even in that moment, if the person this is what I think would be a great way to say that it's a victory, for instance. If somebody comes in presenting with a shoulder issue and we seek neutrality in ourselves, at the end of the session, if they get off the table and they don't even remember that their shoulder had hurt, there you go. And this happens all the time. It happens all the time. It happens when we heal from waking up after a good night of sleep. Like if you have a cold or a flu or whatever, you go to bed sick, you wake up, you don't immediately, the first thing that you think of is not, oh my God, I don't have a flu anymore. I don't have the flu anymore. You wake up and and it might take a couple minutes to remember that yesterday you were sick and now you're fine. The story of the attachment of that suffering doesn't follow with you at the moment that you normally wake up, if that makes sense. So when the person comes out of the session, they might get up and be like, wow, wow, I feel really good. That was amazing. I saw all these colors and I felt really relaxed and everything. And but they're not mentioning anything about their shoulder. So then you can say, well, how does your shoulder feel? Oh, it's strange. I don't even know. Actually, it feels a lot better. There you go. Because you forgot about the story, if that makes sense.
Okay.
The neutrality of you is what will ease the person. Mm-hmm. And it will allow them to heal for 100% for sure. Core.
Bruce. I think the issue is that we are not medical practitioners, and we need to always remember this. So when somebody comes in to see me, again, I'm not particularly interested in their story of pain or suffering, because I know that my session will be a case of me finding my inner stillness, and that will potentially allow the client or the patient to find their inner stillness. And in that moment is the potential for holistic healing.
Right.
That if somebody comes in to say they have a sore shoulder, that could be referred pain from another part of the body. I don't want to get into the mental process of trying to work out what that might be and then adjust my practice to actually suit that. I simply want to be in my beautiful space of neutrality and emptiness, nothing more than that. And whatever comes from the session thereafter, hopefully, is goodness and well-being. But it's never a question of attaching interpretations to things. It's totally in a place of neutrality and always avoiding trying to create judgments on things. Everything has to be unconditional, approach to all things. So I think the issue we have, a lot of students I teach, they believe they're going to be healers. This is what they're coming to Reiki for. And it's a question of trying to pull that back and say, hey, this is really where we are. We're holding space. It's your inner work may affect another person's inner work, but that's all we're doing. We are never passing things on or healing in what people perceive to be healing.
right?
It's a tricky one.
And that's the big Achilles heel, I think, of Reiki, because how is it? It's always talked about like that. Like you will learn to do level 1, and now you can practice on others. Boom, you're a healer or whatever, or level 2. Like whenever sometimes people say, even at level 1, I hear people that are like, now I can work on other people, right? Sure, maybe,
Yeah, I
but
think this is also the problem with Byosen. When we're teaching students, everything has been very based on intuition, and when we start talking about Byosen, suddenly there's the potential of our brain kicking in because we're scanning and potentially starting to interpret sensations, and these interpretations become stories, and potentially then we think we have the ability to heal or solve these things because we can sense the energy, and then potentially with our practice, that sensation will disappear, and then we might believe we're actually creating some kind of healing. Bosun's quite tricky in Reiki. It almost goes against the wisdom of stillness and emptiness. So it's always a tricky one, that.
I think that point is it's our test, Bosun, because we can feel it, it's there, whatever, but it's really a reminder that we're not being neutral, And I'm sure it happens. I mean, like I know for Inamoto, I'm sure I can say this for him. I know for me, for sure, I'll feel it, and then even the understanding that it's there. Oh wow, no neutrality. It's just an opportunity to remember to be neutral again, to return back to neutrality again and again and again and again. Maybe it happens 200 times per session. Great. Yeah, Reiki it's almost always packaged and presented as that we will be healers, that we will, and I know none of you are thinking about yourselves like this, but as teachers, many of you are teachers, and I think we have a responsibility to help discuss or present the practice of Reiki with more honesty in that regard. We're not if Reiki was actually a healing modality, then there would be no hospitals, there would be no doctors, there would be no, we would just be Reiki practitioners. That's it. And I know that's a bit of an exaggerated statement, but what I mean is if we take away the focus on healing and we recognize what Reiki actually is, then it's the most beautiful journey that you can possibly take. Like who wouldn't want to cultivate a life? Who on this planet doesn't want to live a life of peace and happiness? And Reiki is one avenue that might resonate with people to help them cultivate such a life. And that is there's nothing more profound than that. You want to do God's work, you want to become the Buddha, that's how you do it. You live a peaceful life. And Reiki helps us to do that. And it's in all of the pillars of the practice, it's in the precepts, it's in the cornerstones. Everything about Reiki is about just that. So maybe that helps on a discussion about seeing a client. If I don't think I've ever had somebody that has challenged me when I say, my role here is to hold space as neutrally as I can. And your job on the table is to heal as effectively as you can. I can't heal you for you. That's not how it works. Nobody can do that. So the only thing I can do is to be as neutral as possible. Something that I say as well, it's kind of like, imagine on this journey that if you're facing yourself, you're facing the thing that you need to heal from, the pain in the shoulder, whatever it might be, it doesn't make any difference. Maybe the pain in the shoulder was caused by a fall. Let's just say it like this. And the fall was really scary. So they might have to relive the fear of falling, maybe that fear of heights or whatever. So all that stuff is going to come out as the shoulder is letting go of the tension. So they're going to have to face that, maybe relive it, find neutrality. So sometimes if it's appropriate, I'll say that imagine that my role as a Reiki practitioner is to be, metaphorically speaking, right behind you with my hands just off of your body. Barely the touch is barely perceptible on your back. You have to take every step forward into your own healing journey. You have to walk closer to the fear of heights or whatever it might be that you're trying to heal from. And at some point, when that gets scary or overwhelming or daunting, then you can rest. Just lean back and rest in safety, in non-judgment, in neutrality. And then when you're ready to step again, you can step again. Up to you. People have found that to be quite comforting as well, because it's beautiful, because it empowers people to face themselves. And Reiki in so many ways is actually disempowering people to face themselves. We put the onus of healing, we put it on the practitioner or the teacher, or the instructor, or whatever it might be. But then that means the person on the table has no agency over their life. I did all these things to myself. Now you fix it. That's not how it works. That's not how it works. Right? So it's in reality, it's like, listen, I need a lot of help. I did a lot of stuff to myself, and I don't know if I can face it myself. So that's why I'm here to see you. So can you just be non-judgmental and comforting and supportive as I walk my best into myself? And when I trip up, which I'm going to, then it's great to know that you've got my back. That's it. I wouldn't say that to a client because they might be like, well, what are you talking about? I wouldn't say that bit. I'm giving a discussion as to how we should think about it, I think, in many ways. All right. So you got about 15 minutes left. Let me see if there's any other comments here. Heidi. I think we have to clarify to others how and what we practice. I might also ask what they know of Reiki and why they came to me rather than go to a physio. That's a good point. That's one thing that maybe many of you work at a center. That's one thing that I really appreciate with the center that I work at in Hong Kong. There's osteos and physios and Chinese doctors and psychotherapists and all these other people there. So that's a beautiful question to ask. Why Reiki as opposed to traditional acupuncture or reflexology or, a massage therapist or traditional psychotherapy? Yeah, I'm just really sensitive to energy in my body or whatever. Oh, that's interesting. Okay, well, let's see. Then let's open that up and get on the table and let's see how that works. Now, that's an interesting way to think about it. All right, there's one other question that I think we've covered kind of how and what we practice. I hope that if there's any follow-up on that, Heidi, please let me know. But I feel like we may have covered that one. So the last one here, Elizabeth, I think that as Reiki practitioners, we are like a bamboo, allowing the energy to flow to the client and then healing them the way the energy knows how. Yeah, that's right. I mean, we surrender and the bamboo bends, it doesn't break. As I think that's Bruce Lee's famous one of his many famous statements. If we are in that space, I mean, the energy of Reiki is moving through everything at all times. The only thing that gives it resistance is our mind. And our mind, the resistance in our mind is framed of all of our anger to the past and our worry about the future. So if we can soften those two things, then it just flows. We are natural conduits of Reiki. If we weren't, we would be dead. If it wasn't moving through us, we would be dead. If it wasn't moving through the universe, the universe wouldn't exist. So it moves indiscriminately through all things, and it nurtures indiscriminately all things. We resist that. The bamboo doesn't, but we do. So if we can be more like water, more like bamboo or the rock, I think that's so beautiful. In Japan, you can see, and not just Japan, to be fair, but Japan really, really highlights it. But there's so many things that are sacred rocks, sacred trees, sacred streams, sacred fountains that come out of the ground and things like this. And I know that's everywhere. The Grand Canyon, like there's mystical places everywhere, like Jeremy was saying earlier in the call. I think those things become so overwhelmingly beautiful that they help us to forget our past and to forget our future in that moment. And we can just move with the energy of the universe, Like it's always funny, and I know everybody's experienced this. And nobody says hi to anybody except when you're walking out in the forest, right? When you're in the forest, everybody's like, "Hey, what's up? How you doing? Nice to see you." But when you're in the city, nobody does that. That's, there we go. There's an indication of what's going on there. So I think if we can strive to be to the best of our ability under all of our circumstances to be like the bamboo, then we can move and we can reduce our suffering, and we can strive to go towards a life of peace and balance. And that's the real aim of Reiki. That's the real aim. Healing will happen as a byproduct, because if we realize the real meaning of that, if we realize the deep meaning of Onsen Ritsume, or a life of peace in every moment, then we can't be sick, because we can't die, because that's just another aspect of life anyways, so none of that becomes a thing that we even need to worry about. Sick or not, alive or not, those things just happen to the form, but the physical form is impermanent. The energy is permanent. The energy will always change form. It never goes anywhere. It will always be. So that can never be sick or dead. That doesn't make any sense. Just the form. But a tree doesn't cry when it falls over. It just becomes the soil. I'm assuming. I guess I can't speak for the trees, but that's the nature and the circle of life. All right. Anything else? We got 10 more minutes. I've got one more question here. Let's see. Jacob Sands from the Usui Reiki Ryoho group. Been trying to come up. Oh, we've already covered this one, I think. Been trying to come up with a way to start each practice, like setting intentions, what to ask, like Reiki to help with, and so on. What are your recommendations? So setting up a practice or starting a practice, I think we kind of already covered that earlier in the call. But a traditional approach, and this is what I do, when I'm seeing clients, so if I'm I'm seeing them live, and if I'm not at peace because I've got a very busy day or whatever, then I'll bow and gosho with the person on the table, and then I'll do the self-attunement ritual. I'm not going to show that here because it's something that you need to learn in Shimpuden if you haven't learned it already. But I do that just to get into a more neutral mindset. So it's not about the client that left. It's not about the future one. It's about this moment right here, right now. So do whatever you need to do to get into this moment right here, right now, if you're working with somebody else, or if you're working with yourself. Everything that you would have learned in your trainings, that would be like all the meditations like Kenyoku and Joshin Kokyoho, the recitation of the precepts, maybe the meditation or the chanting of the symbols. All of those things are utilized to bring you into this moment right here. And Usui was teaching this, it's saying like, if somebody is still and in this moment right here, right now, well, then we just sit together. There's nothing else to do. So that's why I was saying earlier, we just wait. So when I start my practice tonight, I will sit and I'll wait. I probably won't have to wait for very long, as I'm sure most people don't. Something will come up. You'll get distracted. You'll get busy. Your back will hurt from whatever. It doesn't matter. Those are the things that you're working on in that moment to try to be at peace to the best of your ability. So if I can't sit with it, like, wow, okay, all of a sudden my back hurts and now I'm thinking about it. Neutrality again. Okay, just breathe. Just try to be not distracted by that. And then something else and something else. Once all those things pile up on top of each other and I get too distracted, that's when I might need to distract myself with the hand placements. Instead of thinking about these 50 things that have now caught my attention, let me just focus on 2. And then another 2. And then another 2. And notice with the hand placements, we're working on the nature of the mind. Position number 1, 2, 3, and 4, it's on the head. So it's on the mind. So we focus on the mind first, and that's what we need to work on letting go of. So if I put my hands over my eyes, position 1, and then position 2, hold these for as long as you wish. Position 3, position 4. Is that enough? How do I feel now? Okay, my back still hurts, but I'm not paying attention to it. Then great, then I just sit and wait. And so hopefully in those moments of waiting, I can touch peace, if that makes sense. And when we touch the peace or the stillness in those moments, well, then that's for you to discover what's there, because that's a personal thing, right? That's very beautiful. So 2 hours. Thank you very much, everybody. I really appreciate it. Are there any closing questions or anything that the group would like to share? Well, then from me to all of you, everybody, thank you so much. Thank you for taking your time out of the day today, these 2 hours. I really do hope they've been beneficial to your practice. I hope they've been beneficial to your trajectory with Usui Reiki Ryoho. For everybody listening live and in the future, thank you, thank you, thank you to all of you. Be well, keep up the great practice, and in Gosho to all. Thank you, everybody. Have a great night and a great day. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.